Hey, good morning.
Morning.
It's time to get it in. Let's go ahead and pray, and then we will start our review and our discourse through Daniel chapter 2. Let's pray. Lord, thank you so much again for just the opportunity to come together on a Sunday and think about, ponder your word for all 3 hours. Thank you so much, Lord, for the ability, the method that you have revealed to us in Scripture to bring clarity, to find the intent of the writer, and seek to understand your word more clearly. Pray, God, that this would be beneficial, that this would be productive, and that you would be glorified in this. For it's in your Son's name. Amen. Okay, Daniel chapter 2. What a chapter. We are going through Nebuchadnezzar's dream, and we're going to take this extremely slow. Um, there's a lot of details, as you might imagine, as we talked about last week. We went through the dream in detail and some of the characteristics and the qualities that are found within that dream. And now we're getting into the explanation of this text. As I mentioned before, we're going to have to take this very, very slowly. If you have read this particular passage and have got confused about some of the details, my goal here is to lift that mist, that fog, so that by the end of it, you ought to have a clear picture of at least where I'm going. So let's go ahead and jump in and talk about what we reviewed from last week. After reviewing all of the details of the dream and looking at some of the nuances, we'll be looking at some of those this morning. As a matter of fact, I will continue to keep coming back to these details. We'll be looking at this thoroughly. Nebuchadnezzar observed all of this happening when Daniel is outlining the details of this dream. We see that within the dream, Nebuchadnezzar is viewing this. He's viewing the statue, he's viewing the elements of the statue, the materials. He is there within this dream. The statue that he sees is large and formidable. It's not like some small statue he sees. This thing is huge. It fills up his entire vision as he's observing this. Every aspect of the statue that is observed by Nebuchadnezzar, as Daniel is describing this, is made of a pure material, except for the feet, which is made up of two, iron and the word that's translated clay. We'll talk about that when we get there. The stone in the dream is not quarried from human hands. This is very important and significant. This is something that is not man-made, man-produced. It does not have any man's effort associated with it. And the stone is the one that does the activity. It is the stone that strikes the statue. No other person throws the stone to strike this statue. It is the stone that does this activity. The stone hits the feet, and it seems like from there, we're off to the races. The statue just explodes and ends up becoming nothing but dust. Okay? We're talking about materials that cannot be broken with a stone or a rock, but it ends up exploding and becoming dust, and the wind kind of drives it away. And then the last detail is the stone that is not cut from human hands becomes a big mountain, a large mountain, and fills the entire earth or land, which the statue, by the way, did not do. Daniel does not describe the statue being filling the entire land, but this mountain does. Okay? So let's go back and review again some of the details of this dream, or at least the material aspects. The head, as we read in verse 32 of chapter 2, is conducted of fine gold. Right? The chest and the arms are conducted or made of silver. The belly and the thighs are constructed of bronze. The legs are constructed of iron. Notice these are all different. And the feet consist of partly iron and partly clay. All right, these details are noted within this particular passage. Okay, let's continue on here. Now we're getting into the explanation. We went through the details of the text last week, of the dream last week. Now we're going into the explanation of what this dream means. Again, I want us to try to put ourselves into the mind of those who are Babylonians, right? This is our king who's getting this dream from Daniel, who has been charged at the royal court. Right? This is a big deal. Let's continue. Verse 36. This was the dream. Now we will tell its interpretation before the king. After Daniel gave the details, the specific details again that Nebuchadnezzar was asking for, of the dream that he had, Daniel now begins to tell the explanation or the meaning of the dream that God gave to Nebuchadnezzar. Verse 37, he begins, "You, O king, are the King of kings, to whom the God of heaven has given the kingdom, the power, the strength, and the glory." Daniel begins to detail, starting off with Nebuchadnezzar, emphasizing his status, right? Let's take a look at a couple of words here. King of kings. Melech is the Aramaic phrase here. This is the only time that this word appears in the book of Daniel. Melech. This comes from the Hebrew word, so it shares the same spelling and the same enunciation as the Aramaic. It comes straight from there. And of course, it is translated as King of Kings. Now, Jesus is referred to this, right? He bears this title, but it's not that it's when he uses it, it's not if it's anything new. This is a title that has been used of all of these kings back in the ancient world. If you remember, I'm sure you do, when I taught Revelation, I mentioned that this was not just a title that was exclusively to Christ. This was used in various places in the Hebrew scriptures. The phrase King of Kings speaks of the authority that the king has over the entire earth. That means that other kings recognize that king's influence. Out of all the Gentile kingdoms that are on the earth at this particular time period, this king has the greatest influence, so much so that he can tell other kings what to do, and they will do it. That's kind of the idea. These kings acknowledge Nebuchadnezzar as a very significant figure in the world, even though these kings have influence as well. Okay? As a matter of fact, we see this again, as I mentioned before, this phrase is not uncommon in the Hebrew scriptures. As a matter of fact, in Ezekiel chapter 26, verse 7, the Lord mentions Nebuchadnezzar as this. He says this, "Behold, I will bring upon Tyre from the north Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, king of kings." This is God saying this about Nebuchadnezzar. "With horses, chariots, cavalry, and a great army." Okay? Again, individuals would see this Nebuchadnezzar as a significant, important political figure. In Ezra, chapter 7, verse 12, this is also used of Xerxes as well. It says, now this is the copy of the decree which King Artaxerxes gave to Ezra the priest, the scribe, learned in the words of the commandments of the Lord and his statutes to Israel. Artaxerxes, King of Kings, to Ezra the priest, the scribe of the law of the God of heaven, perfect peace. So Artaxerxes describes himself as the King of Kings, an influential king that, again, influences other kings and that other kings acknowledge. Okay. So Daniel describes, by way of the explanation of the dream, that you, O king, are the King of Kings. You, all other kings recognize you, and they are influenced by your decisions. He continues in verse 36, you, O king, are the King of Kings, to whom the God of heaven has given the kingdom, the power, the strength, and the glory. Let's take a look at this word kingdom. This is the Aramaic phrase malkut. This Aramaic phrase occurs 57 times in the scriptures. The Aramaic phrase occurs 53 times in the book of Daniel between chapter 2 and 7. Okay? That's a lot. It is translated as kingdom, reign, for someone's authority over a particular region or area, or royalty in regards to their status as compared to like a commoner. The root word for kingdom, that is this word, corresponds to the Hebrew word malkuth. Okay? So we have malkuth, which is the Aramaic phrase, and that comes from the root word malkuth. I want to take a moment to look at this word here, malkuth, just for a minute, since this is the root word that the Aramaic phrase appears. This Hebrew phrase occurs 91 times in the Hebrew scriptures, 16 times in the book of Daniel after chapter 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. It occurs there. This phrase most likely is translated sovereignty in the book of Daniel. This corresponding word not only emphasizes the individual, but all of the qualities that make up a kingdom that is under that person's influence. So taking from the root word, seeing it in Aramaic, this is not just talking about Nebuchadnezzar as an influential power, but it's also talking about the qualities that make up a particular kingdom. We'll talk about that in a second. It's not just talking about just Nebuchadnezzar, just in general, but all of the territory, all of the citizens, everything else that is within his influence. Continuing to look at some of the qualities and characteristics of verse 37, says the God of heaven has given the kingdom, the power. Chesed is the Aramaic term for power. Chesed. This Aramaic word appears twice in the Hebrew scriptures. It is also found in chapter 4, verse 30. You could turn there. I will start at verse 28 of chapter 4. This is concerning Nebuchadnezzar and him losing his reason. It says, all this happened to Nebuchadnezzar the king 12 months later, as he was walking on the roof of the royal palace of Babylon. The king reflected and said, is this not Babylon the Great, which I myself have built as a royal residence by the might of my power and for the glory of my majesty. I can't wait to get there. That's a fun chapter. So we have the word power here, chesed, used. He uses it of himself. And yet we have Daniel in his explanation of the dream saying that God has given you this chesed, this power. The Aramaic root word for chesed is the Aramaic word chasan, which is translated to take possession of or to take hold of. So God has given him this kingdom to possess, to keep, to take hold of, to take possession of, to have. He has this influence. So he has the kingdom. This kingdom has been given to him to take possession of as the ruler or the king of Babylon, this region. He has also been given strength, according to Daniel chapter 2, verse 37. Tekophe is the Aramaic word for this word that's translated strength. It appears twice in the Hebrew scriptures, and it also occurs in chapter 4, verse 27. This word is translated strength, power, and might, of course, and this basically concerns the authority that Nebuchadnezzar has over the region that has been given to him to rule. So he's been given this title as an influential authority over even kings recognize his power and his authority. He's been able to conquer lots of territories. He has been given this land to take possession of. He's been given extreme influence and authority over many lands and subjects. And he's also been given glory. Yakar is the Aramaic word. 7 times it appears in the scriptures. And this word only appears in the book of Daniel between chapters 2 and 7. It is translated glory, honor, or fame. This word corresponds with the Hebrew word yakar, meaning to honor, esteem, or recognize. Okay? It seems like this word corresponds from the Hebrew word that is spelled the same. Again, yakar, yakor, they're very, very similar in how they are spelled. So he's been given lots of authority, lots of influence, lots of strength. People recognize him. They acknowledge him as such. He is an influential king. Well, if we were under the rule of Nebuchadnezzar, as subjects of Nebuchadnezzar, that would make us very proud, right? Let's talk about the elements of a kingdom, because he mentions that God, the God of heaven, has given him the kingdom. What makes up a kingdom? What are the elements of a kingdom? Right? Well, first of all, you need some land, right? You got to have some land, and you got to have some territories within that land. Cities, municipalities, whatever, right? You got to have physical land and territories, and those territories have to have borders. You have to have a ruler or rulers within a land or a territory. It wouldn't make any sense to have all this land and no one to govern it. Of course, you have to have subjects or citizens who reside in these lands or territories under this ruler or kings, right? This is one of the reasons why we as a country are not called a kingdom. Because we have a representative form of government, right? I know that you guys call this the chief's kingdom, but no, that's not what this means here. Okay. We also have to have customs or laws that govern the subjects or citizens who reside in these lands and territories under the ruler or rulers, right? You have to have these laws or these customs. We talked about this at length in the book of Esther, right? That they had particular laws that they had to follow, and they could not abolish those laws. They could make laws to nullify those laws, but they couldn't abolish them, right? And a centralized capital. Okay? In this case, the centralized capital is the city of Babylon, by which Nebuchadnezzar dwells. Okay? The city of Babylon does not make up the whole of Babylon. Okay? So putting all of this together in verse 36, verse 37, the elements of the kingdom and all of this stuff, putting all this together is that Daniel stated that God has given him rulership of the most influential kingdom of earth at the time. That Daniel is right. It's Daniel that Daniel is giving this explanation. All the might, all the influence, the recognition that and that comes with it. Although there were many other kings and kingdoms, this was not the only kingdom that existed this time. Babylon had the greatest influence. Here is a picture of Babylon during the time of Nebuchadnezzar. Again, they had pretty big influence here. Okay? The kingdom also expanded, of course, a great deal. Chapter 2, verse 38. And wherever the sons of men dwell, or the beasts of the field, or the birds of the sky, he has given them into your hand and has caused you to rule over them all. You are the head of gold. Daniel emphasizes essentially what he said in verse 37, that he has the influence and authority, and it extends from humankind to animals as well. That by extension, all other kings and kingdoms recognize Babylon and Nebuchadnezzar. Again, it's not just Nebuchadnezzar that they recognize, but it's also the land that he rules over. Okay? Again, they're one and the same. God has given Nebuchadnezzar this influence and governance. And because of this, you are, or he is, the head of gold. The head of gold represents Nebuchadnezzar, and by extension, Babylon. Because Nebuchadnezzar rules over Babylon. Just as an aside, as I mentioned before, at this point in the explanation of the dream, King Nebuchadnezzar is the focus, of course, as we just read. Additionally, I am also convinced that the main focus, again, is not only the king and his influence, but the kings and the kingdoms that hold control over the city and region. Now, why would I say that? There's a couple of reasons, I think. One is that the city of Babylon, and Babylon just in the region itself, rest on the Euphrates River. This is very important because the Euphrates River is important. It is a touch point for commerce, for trade, and for defense. If you're going to take down Babylon, particularly the city, you're going to have to try to do it by way of the Euphrates. Okay? Commerce was very good. The Euphrates River was an important river that was, again, important for commerce and for trade and things like that. This is what made Babylon rich and wealthy in the first place. right? Was the commerce and trade that was involved. Okay? Now, the city itself, Babylon, was rich and fertile in land and things like that, and very prosperous. But the city of Babylon, in and of itself, was the crown jewel. It was considered to be one of the wonders of the world, as a matter of fact. They were the first, supposedly, to have hanging gardens. There's some argument that there may have that might not be true. But nevertheless, even if they weren't there, it was still an amazing place to go, as well as the region of Babylon itself. It was very fertile and rich with resources. Okay? And that was another reason for its recognition. So, looking at this statue, we have explained the first part of this statue, the head of gold, which is Nebuchadnezzar, or by extension, the Babylonian Empire. And of course, Nebuchadnezzar's reign was from 605 to 561 BC. That was the time that he had passed, and his reign had ended. Verse 39 of chapter 2. Let's continue. After you, there will arise another kingdom inferior to you. We got to take a look at some words here, because what does it mean, inferior? Let's take a look at the term after you. As you can see here, we've got a couple of Aramaic letters here, and they are color-coded. Let's take a look. This letter combined with this word, this phrase here, this word atar, this is the Aramaic word here. This letter combined with this word operates as the conjunction. So you can translate this and after. Now, it's not in my version of the Bible, but you could do that if you wanted to, because this is a conjunction within this particular phrase. The Aramaic word in red, again, is the Aramaic word atar. It occurs 8 times in the scriptures, 4 times in the book of Daniel, 4 times in Ezra. And it is translated either after, place, or track. So, and after. And within this context, it is used as a time marker. So after Nebuchadnezzar passes, or after his reign. Again, this word can mean in place of or in track of. So in place of you, or in track of you, or after you. The word in blue is a pronominal. Second person singular, which is essentially a pronoun. So and after you, or and in the place of you. Why is this important? Why would we spend time talking about just these words translated here? Well, the importance of the construction of this word, again, informs the audience, the readers, us, those who are citizens of Babylon, that after Nebuchadnezzar and his reign in Babylon, there will be another kingdom. As a matter of fact, the Aramaic word that is used in verse 37 here, verse 37 is the word malku, same word that's used in the previous verses. This included all of the same qualities underscored with Nebuchadnezzar: land, territory, subjects, influence, all of that. However, we have another word here, and that is the word after you there will arise. The Aramaic word translated arise is the word kum. We talked about this already. We've already seen this before. This is in the Piel stem, which essentially is active, and is translated arise or ascend. So in track of you or after you, there will arise another kingdom. Another kingdom will come. inferior to you. Now, what does that mean? I know we know what it means, but what does it mean here in this text? Well, the Aramaic word is ara. This word occurs 22 times in the scriptures, 20 times in the book of Daniel. Now, what's interesting is that this word is translated in my Bible as inferior. I don't know what version you're using, but this word literally means earth or land. How do you get inferior from earth or land? Right? What does that mean? So another kingdom after you, there will arise another kingdom, earth to you or land to you. That doesn't make any sense, right? As a matter of fact, this word, the Hebrew word that corresponds to this Aramaic word is ares. Ares is frequently translated land. So ara comes from this word, ares. So what does it mean here when it talks about earth or land? Well, if you want to, I believe it's talking about in manners of degrees. So if you wanted to say, their authority reaches as high to the heavens, right? Or their authority is as low as the ground. That's kind of the idea here. That's why it's translated inferior. This word is used to talk about the degree the degree of this influence this kingdom has throughout the land. Now notice it says, after you, there will arise another kingdom inferior to you. Is this kingdom inferior at the time that Daniel is saying this? Or is it inferior are they inferior when he dies, essentially, when Nebuchadnezzar dies? I am convinced, based upon the language, that this Aramaic word is used to discuss the degree or level of power, strength, influence, and authority that this kingdom has at the time Nebuchadnezzar had the dream. They are inferior now. They will not be inferior later. Okay. Remember, he is the King of Kings at this moment. So they have to be inferior now. They cannot be greater than him. Okay. Its influence is small at the present time of Nebuchadnezzar. Now, how do I know this? In order for us to do this, I know you guys probably don't like this. We got to take a historical detour. We got to do it. Okay. I'm sorry. Don't blame me. Okay. It's very fascinating here. King Nebuchadnezzar's rule was from 605 BC to 601 BC. I want to make this very clear. Remember, Daniel is a historical book. It's not just prophecy. Okay. As a matter of fact, lots of prophecy has to do with history. This is a historical book. So King Nebuchadnezzar's rule was from 605 BC to 561 BC. I refuse to use CE. I will not use before the Common Era. Yes, no, I won't use it. Okay. During this time, the kingdom of Persia, which was a neighboring territory to Babylon, was very, very small and had very little influence. As a matter of fact, here's Babylon here, and here is Persia, or Persis at this time. This is the heartland of Persia. Okay? So compared to Babylon and its influence and size, it's very small, not influential at all. Okay? During this time, the kingdom of Persia was a neighboring territory. Again, had very little influence. 559 BC, 2 years after the death of King Nebuchadnezzar. Okay, so Nebuchadnezzar dies in 561. 559, Persia shows up on the scene. Okay. Persia ends up retaining and having an influential ruler that becomes very, very powerful, and that is Cyrus the Great. Cyrus the Great ruled from 559 to 529. Now that's very fascinating because Cyrus is found in Scripture. In 550 BC, approximately or around or about 10 years after the death of Nebuchadnezzar, Cyrus's rule expanded into the region of Media. Okay? Here is Persis, the heartland of Persia, and here we have the region of Media, which is why it's called the Persian Media Empire, although it's just the Persian Empire, essentially. So he amasses a huge amount of territory in a short amount of time. I mean, 10 years to amass that amount. That's huge. Okay? He expands this kingdom very drastically. 4 years after this, so now it's 14 years after the death of Nebuchadnezzar, Cyrus's rule expanded into the region of Lydia. Okay? So we have in 550 BC, he expands into Media, and in 546 BC, he expands into the region of Lydia. And here we have Lydia over here at the very end. Okay, so in a short amount of time, look at what he's done. He has essentially surrounded Babylon. Pretty amazing. It was not until 539 BC, 21 years after the death of Nebuchadnezzar, Cyrus conquered Babylon and the city of Babylon. So notice, after Nebuchadnezzar's dead, he is long gone. Cyrus becomes the new ruler of Babylon, okay? And thus the city of Babylon. Which means, if we look at this here, he now has control of the Royal Road, right? Which was a highway, again, that had lots of trade, lots of commerce. Your dignitaries, your kings would go there in short order. This was also used to dispatch troops in various areas. You can get to places very quickly. You have the Euphrates River, again, which was a central part of commerce and trade here within this region. So they control essentially commerce, travel, right, and defense. In 539, he conquers Babylon. So he is inferior now, right? At the time that King Nebuchadnezzar is living, that Persis or Persia is inferior now, but they will not be. They will be influential throughout the entire region. This makes up the second kingdom. Cyrus the Great, or the Persian kingdom. That is the silver, the chest and the arms. His reign begins over Babylon in 539 BC. Man, he's already at this point he's already amassed tons of territory, tons of ground. People recognize Cyrus and who he is. He refers to himself as the Great, right? And all these other individuals acknowledge that he is the Great because, again, of the land and the influence that he has amassed. So where are we at with the dream? Let's sum all this up. The head of gold is King Nebuchadnezzar. He is the one who starts off at the top. He is the King of Kings, the one who all kings acknowledge and recognize. And he rules over this territory known as Babylon, and the city is its capital. Cyrus the Great, I believe in the Persian media or the Persian Empire, is the next one on the list. He, in 539 BC, comes in and takes over as the ruler of Babylon, the overarching ruler of Babylon, and again amasses influence and power and recognition as a result of his position. We are not done. There's still plenty more details to come as we continue to look at the explanation of Daniel's dream, Nebuchadnezzar's dream that God gave to him, and the explanation that he gave to Daniel concerning it. Let's go ahead and pray, and then we will close out here. There are so many details within this text, and it is amazing to see that prophecy is aligned with history, that really it's a disclosing of your actions, God, throughout history, in establishing these kingdoms and the influence that they have, that Cyrus and Nebuchadnezzar and all those who we will discuss cannot take credit for the things that you give to them. They cannot. You have given it all to them, and you are laying out Gentile history right before the very eyes of Nebuchadnezzar in this particular passage. May we continue to marvel and think about these things so much and be encouraged that you are the God of heaven, the one who rules over all. Thank you so much for it's in your Son's name. Amen.